very much for that, Ranko. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for turning up, and hope you've all had your coffee to get started and get awake and going for the day. Ranko, thanks for the introduction. So, Customer Decisioning and Fraud, it's a new team inside technology at ANZ. And what we're really trying to do is create that single point where the businesses that need to use information, analytics, decisions can come to try and align around the customer. Not to have a fraud decision and a collections decision and a marketing decision and a pricing decision that aren't aligned, but all come together. You can imagine in a large bank, any large corporate, trying to get that alignment in the businesses is really hard, and trying to get that alignment in technology is really hard, and trying to get the projects to align is really hard. So I'm up for a few challenges, and it's going to be fun. I don't think ANZ needs any introduction. Large bank, large presence around Asia, Australia, New Zealand. I won't go into that too much, I'm sure you all know who we are. So what I'd like to do is business case development in data according to the ancient Greeks. So how do I make this a bit more fun rather than a dry, Excel spreadsheets and formulas and calculations and total cost of ownership and things along those lines. So I wanted to get some inspiration about why we're doing this and how to do it and how to make sure you're successful. That's really the business case, not the numbers, not just the ROI or things along those lines. So to frame the conversation, so you've got to have some sort of framework always. I love frameworks. To try and understand how to get value out of data for any business that you're in. And I thought about this a little bit. So first thing is you've got to understand the size of the opportunity. What can you do with information in your business? How much value could you possibly create? And then that's going to be moderated by your ability and your preparedness to actually get it done. And then how long it's going to take to deliver it. So if you can deliver value quickly, it's going to be good and you can return it. If you try and deliver value too slowly, clearly the value is going to maybe not be quite delivered to its full capability. But then as I'm sure all of you know, data is not a destination, information is not a destination, decisioning is not a destination, it's a journey. And so it's about keeping it going. And the way you do the first one, the second one, the third one is going to set you up for how many more of these you can do. And how long what you've done can survive when the project's gone, when all those people who are around to get it set up aren't there to nurture it. Does it keep thriving? Does it keep going? So they're the four components I thought about. How do you actually get value out of data in any organisation? And I want to drill down into that a little bit more and get to the ancient Greeks a little bit and help them help us understand some of the core principles around understanding those four dimensions, in my opinion. So, the opportunity. What is the size of an opportunity for information in any organisation today? I've been in data decisioning for 20 plus years, and I've seen lots of different business cases over that journey where things like we need to get faster reporting that we're already doing, and that business case is going to save us 2 FTE a year, which let's call that, for sake of argument, $400,000. Well, that's not going to get you a lot of investment. Compared to other organisations I've seen in my journey who consider that information and the way they use information contributes something like 15% conservatively of their market capitalisation. And that was a bank in the US who figured that out and how they worked it out. I was looking at companies who are like them but don't have branches and things along those lines. So if that were true at ANZ, then the opportunity for exploiting information is roughly $10 billion. Okay, that might get me some investment. Now, that's not the way we talk about it, just to be very clear, but that's the way I think about it. When you think about other companies like the unicorns of Uber and Airbnb and things along those lines, their market cap is almost entirely driven by information, in my opinion. So set your ambitions high, but then don't deliver on that ambition. Have that as your guiding principle. Have that as the reason we're on the journey. Another one from Herclitus, and probably my favourite, and actually the reason I did this according to the ancient Greeks is this quote. The reason for doing anything around information, again, in my opinion, is to identify those things we need to change in our business because of what our customers expect, what our competition's doing, what our regulators are doing, So identify those things that need to change, and change isn't just dramatic things. It's optimize, tweak, slightly improve, do your Lean Sigma engineering on all these processes. Information helps work that out, and gaps in information flows help work that out. So the purpose is to identify things you can change, but then part of the purpose as well is when you do that change, you've got to be able to accommodate that back into your whole ecosystem. So the thing you're doing around information, analytics, decisioning is entirely about change. Not just the thing you're trying to identify, but the things you've got to accommodate and live within. Really, really important thing for me is about how easy it is then in the way you set yourselves up to accommodate that change. You've got to make sure that you don't do things hardwired to today's structures, to today's products, to today's systems, to today's number one priority, because that will all change. And if the org structure changed and your information architecture needed to change to reflect that, in my opinion, you've got that information architecture wrong. So set yourself up to live in a changing environment and get really, really comfortable with change. Probably the close to the most important one for me is there's so much that people measure that is about what is easy to count. Right? But sometimes what's easy to count isn't actually giving you any information about the real purpose that things happening. So things like how many FTE do we have? What were sales? How many branches do we have? Well, we can count those. And then you divide those things into sales per employee and things along those lines, and that's great. And they're giving you relative performance metrics. But it's really hard to then identify what would I change to change that metric, because it's just like a temperature gauge. It's not really giving you the reason the weather's happening or the climate's happening. You've got to really think about those people then who are able to understand your business, understand why things happen in your business, and ask the right questions. Getting the right question asked is actually almost half the challenge. Once you've got the right question, getting answers can be relatively simple, depending on whether you've got the data, obviously. So this is really important for me, is make sure you've got the right things that you're trying to measure. And that's always going to be a journey. I remember seeing a presentation, actually it might have been here, a hospitality company in the US, Applebee's, talked about their journey of their key performance indicator and defining their key performance indicator. And they went through something like 3 or 4 iterations to get it right, because every version of their KPI that they started off with, which was easy to count, created the wrong behaviour in the restaurants, created the wrong behaviour on the menu. And so they ended up with a metric which they called the metric, because it wasn't sales per employee or anything like that. It was a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and that was the metric. And they knew when that was going up, business was good, and when it's going down, business was bad. But it was measuring the right things, not measuring the things that were easy to count. So that's opportunity. How big is the opportunity? Realise it's going to change all the time, and that you need to make sure you're measuring and doing the things that matter, not the things that are easy. So once you've got that, and that's kind of getting that vision and that purpose and the sense of momentum going, now you've got to set yourself up and you've got to do it. Most often, you're not going to be working in a greenfields environment. You've got to have something that you need to remediate, retire, move on from, and protect. So it's always hard to set yourself up in a current environment to change. One of the really important things, obviously, then, is to have the right team. Have that right visionary, have that right support, have the right stakeholders, have the right executives in there giving you that support, but also have the people in the team who are going to design it, think about it, plan it, deliver it, with the right experience, with the right expertise, with the true understanding of how information is going to work, not what reports are going to be required, and get those people going. And part of the reason to get that right team going is because that team's going to need to scale when you're successful. And if you've got a very large team where you as a leader needs to be in all the conversations, well, you're not going to scale. So you need to get the team to be self-sustaining, self-organising, all those agile concepts about good small teams who can deliver. And I've seen small teams of 5 deliver in 3 months, deliver more than large teams of hundreds in years because of the right team, the right assembly. Beauty of style and harmony, simplicity is really, for me, about architecture, about design, about understanding how things are going to fit together. It's really easy the first time you do something just to smash it in and get it done, and it will work. And it will be relatively cheap and be fast. And then the second one you do, you smash that in, you might get that right, and you might realise you've got to change some of the things you've built beforehand. But then when you get to 3 or 4 things you've just smashed in, you realise you've actually created another problem. You've got multiple versions of the truth, you've got different people using different tools, you've got no synergy, and it won't scale. You'll scale, but not at a good enough level. So I think it's really important to spend some time thinking about how is this going to hang together. And this is not about technology. Technology is part of the overall environment, but it's about, what business processes are we trying to do? How would that work? How does the information flow between big data platforms, relational platforms, non-relational platforms, analytic tools, reporting tools, decision engines? How's that going to all happen so that when we change, it's really easy and simple and we don't need to do a whole bunch of testing again, things along those lines. So we've got to think about all those things pretty hard. And kind of like when I presume, I'm not an architect or a builder, but for a long time, I'm sure when somebody says, I'm going to build a skyscraper, there's no activity on the site and people don't see stuff happening and go, well, where are we going? What's happening? That's because behind the scenes, they're doing all the planning, they're doing all the engineering, they're getting all the approvals, getting all the staff set up and getting everything lined up. And then what surprises me, so I work down in Docklands, and I see these large buildings get thrown up in 12 months. Once they start, it just goes whoosh. So there's a lot of activity just planning, and then the build's easy. So don't underinvest and don't try and skip through the planning quickly when you've got that really large journey to go on. Spend the right time doing your planning. And there are people who can accelerate that for you, obviously. We're not inventing the wheel here a lot. It's best practices are out there. It's not a matter of going, I wonder what a wheel looks like. It's go and get the wheels and assemble them. With that large journey, that large ambition, you've got to break it down. And I don't just mean agile sprints. Agile sprints are an important part of that, and information actually lends itself to iterations really well because your understanding of information is going to develop. It's not locked in and then used, it's going to develop. I mean also, in that full view of all the things we need to do, make sure you break them down into teams that interact and talk to each other, but don't have them be one large project team. I think you can actually break it down into lots more smaller streams. And then each stream can go at its own pace, delivering to its own outcomes without having to be locked into big releases of your information architecture or your analytics architecture or decision architecture. Get them all going neatly together. So that was preparation. Get the right team, plan, and then think about how you're going to sequence things over 12 to 24 month time horizon. And I'll come back to why only that far in a minute. So how do you then deliver on all of this? So it's really important if you want to scale and you want to be fast that you actually have things that are repeatable. Most important thing I think just in delivery itself is being able to reuse patterns, being able to reuse interface methods and standards and analytics tools and deployment methods, things along those lines. But I think it's also important to think, and I was talking to somebody just last week and they were saying, it's really good, we can do 4 releases a year in our architecture. I said, well, that's great. How often after each release do you spend fixing up over all the mistakes you made in the release? I said, oh yeah, we spend about 4 to 6 weeks every release fixing up the things we broke with that release. And that's because they only do it 4 times a year. They don't get good at releases. They don't get good at deployment. And so if you did a release every week, well, you can't spend 6 weeks fixing it up. You've got to get good at change. You've got to get good at deployment. So get those routines and practice and rituals in place so it actually just becomes the way you do it, not the way you need to think about doing it. Long quote. I'll let you all read it. But I was actually surprised how much this quote from Plato links to my understanding of how real value comes out from information. So he talks about when you bring things together, when you bring data together and you smash it together, you get it to rub against each other. And you get people who actually, without trying to have an agenda, say, what does this data mean? What does this tell me? What do I get out of this? What do I understand about my business because of this? And you get this insight that changes your way of thinking about what you do as a business, as a team, as a company. We're going through one right now, and I can't really share too much about it, but the reason we built our information architecture had nothing to do with this value piece that we're now delivering. We would never have been able to justify building our information architecture for this new value piece. It would not have got up. But now we've done it, this thing we totally unexpected is going to create a lot of value for us, but we wouldn't have been able to justify it ahead of time. Expect the unexpected is really about, I guess, 3 or 4 things. One is you'll find things you didn't know you were going to find, and that will change your view of what you need to do. Expect that to happen and be able to accommodate that. The other is, unfortunately, data is messy. I'm sure we all know that. Analysts kind of thrive on getting stuff done, so sometimes they create some mess. Sometimes people have the wrong understanding of data and they use it inappropriately. And so you'll end up basically trying to fix up things in your environment. You've got to cope with that. And then there's always the unexpected fire drill when someone comes in and says, this has happened, we need to do this, stop everything, do this. So you've got to be able to cope with all that in your rhythm. Really simple one, tell people what you've done. Tell people that you've delivered value. Tell people what difference you've made, so that then they will keep giving you more money and more time to go back through the loop and get more done. That sequencing, that planning for 12 to 24 months, every time you deliver something, you'll have learned something which may change your view of what you need to do next. So not only is your environment changing in the sense of what you're doing, but what you're going to do next is going to change all the time as you learn more, as your competitors change, things along those lines. So don't set your plan in stone and then say we're going to deliver that for 3, 5 years, whatever. Keep looking at it. So that's the old, backlog grooming and things along those, which are agile methods. And then think big. Go for it. Don't be safe. Safe in this environment right now, data, decisions and so on, will get left behind. You need to be ambitious. You need to really strive for change and link this back to the first part, think big. Understand that this is really a massive opportunity in your business to make that change, to deliver value to your customers, to your stakeholders, and have fun as you're doing it. So with that, I'm really happy to take any questions. I've got my details in the, if anyone wants to follow up afterwards. But happy to have any questions from the audience and see where that takes us.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Sean.